Well, returning now to one of our top stories, a massive prisoner swap is underway between Ukraine and Russia. I spoke to Kateryna Argyrou from the Australian Federation of Ukrainian Organisations about it a short time ago.
It's incredibly heartening to see the exchange of prisoners, especially seeing Ukrainian servicemen, Ukrainian heroes return. Just today, we heard about the announcement of 390 Ukrainians returning. 270 of those were prisoners of war, and the rest were actually civilians, Ukrainian civilians that were captured by the Russian armed forces and have now been returned. Some of these people have been in Russian captivity for 3 years. They have undergone incredible torture, the conditions that they were under. It's very difficult to fathom. We had a former Ukrainian prisoner of war here in Sydney with us not so long ago, and his personal story and the things that he endured, it was absolutely mind-blowing how he was treated, the type of pain he was under, the type of torture that he had to experience. So seeing those scenes coming out of Ukraine is incredibly moving, and it's heartening. We know that this is one of the results of the talks between Russia and Ukraine, and is part of a larger exchange of prisoners of war, 1,000 for 1,000.
Yeah, how close do you feel a ceasefire deal is for Ukraine?
Rhiannon, I want to say that it's close. As they say, hope dies last. But let's look at the actions. My entire family is in Ukraine right now. I spoke to my mother overnight. She lives in Kiev. My grandparents live in Kiev. They said that it was one of the worst attacks that they've experienced during the whole full-scale invasion. There were a number of ballistic missiles that hit Kiev. There were over 250 attack drones that flew in the direction of Ukraine from Russia, attacking peaceful cities, mostly people sleeping at night. So while we see headlines and talks of ceasefires and peace deals, Ukrainians are experiencing what Russians are really like, and that is saying one thing and doing completely another. So let's look at Russia's actions rather than Russia's words to get a better understanding if peace is anywhere near. And seeing some of the things coming out of the peace talks, it's not very encouraging, considering that Ukraine was represented at the highest level. President Zelensky traveled to Istanbul to participate in the peace talks. The Russian Federation sent representatives that weren't of Zelensky's nature. President Putin didn't attend, so I think that really shows the intentions from the Russian side.
With those peace talks, what were you hoping for? What were you listening for? And how did that match up with the eventual outcome?
Well, what we were hoping for is that what was proposed by President Trump would be accepted. And President Trump was proposing a ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire, which Ukraine was ready to accept that. Russians have then come in over the top with more demands, more things that would essentially leave Ukraine in a position where it would capitulate, which no Ukrainian is ready to capitulate, no Ukrainian is ready to surrender, because we know what we are fighting for. Russia is waging a genocidal war against Ukraine. Russia has no intentions to stop. They said that they are willing to fight forever. And we know that from our personal experience with having our family there, and we just know what type of conditions they are under every single day and the attacks that go on every single day. I was in Ukraine just a month ago and visited the town of Sumy, which is only 28 kilometers away from the Russian border. I saw how Sumy was under attack every single day while these peace talks were going on. So it's very clear that Russia cannot be trusted. While they say one thing, we really have to look at their actions, and they have not stopped. They've only increased their attacks both on civilian objects and across the entire front line. My cousin is currently serving in the armed forces of Ukraine. He's been there since the very first days of the full-scale invasion, more than 3 years ago, that he went to defend Ukraine, and he's seen it all. He works as a medical evacuation ambulance driver, and he said the number of evacuations that they have to do and the types of things that he's seeing on the front line now, it hasn't been that bad since the launch of the full-scale invasion. So that is exactly what Russia is doing. They're only escalating while trying to distract with so-called peace talks. That's why I think it's incredibly important that Ukraine stands strong and our allies and partners like Australia continue to stand with Ukraine and to support Ukraine. That's why it was very also heartening to see the meeting between President Zelensky and our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in Rome, and the messaging that came out from our PM's office after that, saying that Australia will stand with Ukraine and continues to stand with Ukraine, I think is incredibly important, especially during this time where we don't really know where the U.S. stands.
We did see Donald Trump on the phone to Vladimir Putin over the last week or so. That did buoy hopes of some kind of resolution. How do you view the US president's role in this?
Well, President Trump came in trying to broker a peace deal. And maybe if we were dealing with a normal negotiation, a business negotiation that he is used to, then perhaps logic would prevail. But we are dealing with President Putin that is a war criminal, a warmonger. We are dealing with the Russian Federation that has tried to oppress Ukrainians for generations. My own grandparents went through it. Now my generation's going through it. It is something that Russia has in its goals to completely erase Ukraine off the face of the earth. They will not stop with 4 territories that they want to take. They will not even stop at Ukraine. Russia has made their intentions clear that they would like to reinstate the Russian Empire. That's why countries that border Ukraine and even beyond should take this seriously and just understand what kind of intentions Russia has. So that's why we must stand strong. And the only way that Russia can be defeated, the only way we can achieve just and lasting peace is if Russia is defeated on the battlefield. That's why we continue to advocate for military aid here in Australia. That's why Ukrainians across the world continue to advocate for military aid, because they need to have the tools to defend themselves, and they cannot do it alone.
All right, Kateryna, Argyrou, we will have to leave it there, but thank you so much for speaking with us.